Hello, my name is Roman Dzindzichashvili, and this is the part two lecture on English opening. And we are currently on the C4 E5 move, this type of English. As we already know, there is possibility of C4 C5 and even some other rare varieties of English. So we are on C4 E5, knight C3, and I want to mention one system, knight C6, and my recommendation, as I already mentioned, is knight F3. And this is even if black makes second move knight F6, we still go knight F3. So I would expect transposition normally, but there are some specific positions. If black plays knight C6 and on knight F3, after knight F6, white goes G3. This is not the move I would recommend, and I already said that I suggest D3, trying in a part one I suggested D3, trying to get of some kind of positions of possibly Sicilian Draken with extra tempo for white, or even Sicilian Scheveningen with E3. However, white can also go G3. Now, I want to mention one curious and kind of a funny game that lasted 7 moves between two grandmasters. And the result was not a draw. After G3, bishop b4 was played. This is very reasonable move, and that's the move I like. Knight d5, white played, and in this position, the correct move is e4. White could also have played here bishop g2, but this is completely different type of position. Black eventually is going to castle here and take on c3 and go d6. Even if white takes with a d pawn, maybe h6 first to stop bishop g5 and d6. Black is okay. However, knight d5 was played in that game, and the correct response for black is e4. E4 is the right move. However, in the game that lasted 7 moves, it's already 5 moves. So imagine there is a result, not a draw, will be in 2 moves, and that's exactly what happened. Instead of playing e4, or maybe even d6, which is a playable move as well, but black played knight takes d5. After knight takes d5 in cd, black played e4, and this move loses the game. Actually, with white was Petrosian, and with the black was Hans III, Dutch grandmaster. White simply took the knight, and after black took on f3, white played queen b3 and black resigned. They lose a piece. If bishop moves back, b4 bishop, and f takes e, bishop takes c2 doesn't change anything, then white is going to play simply c takes b, and also doesn't change anything, a5 move, because white goes a3. It's very simple, very primitive, and very decisive. So this will happen in a game. This is kind of a trick that it's highly unusual that you can play queen b3 in this type of position and win a piece. But again, mistake was knight takes d5. Well, actually, knight takes d5 with intention of playing e4 was a mistake. Knight d4 is still playable here because if knight takes e5, there is queen e3, and this is good position for black. Knight cannot retreat because of the checkmate. It's another result in the 8 moves. And if white goes f4, the weakening king position. We don't have to know this because you should not take on d5 and go e4. So let's go back to this position and see what happens if after knight f6 g3 and now bishop b4 knight d5. What happens after e4? Knight h4 is another move. Besides knight takes b4, knight takes b4, and knight d4. All these positions are very, very playable for both sides. So the only thing you cannot do is to blunder a piece. Now let's go to the possibility. Suppose you play white, knight f3, f5. Let me tell you something. This is not the move I would make. I think this is very early advance of pawns, weakening black's position, and in a very early stage. Those hyperactive moves with the black in the early stage of the game, I always disliked. Well, white can continue normally like d3 or g3, or play more aggressively d4. d4 is a good move. After e4, the only thing you should know in this position, there is a one very dangerous line, dangerous for white, that you should stay away from, and everything else is okay here. For example, okay is knight d2. If knight takes d4, simply knight takes e4. Okay is bishop g5. Now, if bishop e7, then you simply take on e7, and suppose queen takes, you have a good position after playing knight d2. And after takes knight d2, what happens? Knight takes d4 always will be met with knight takes e4. e3 is not very good way to play for black. Actually, it's not good at all because we simply take on e3. Now queen takes e3 loses the game because of knight d5, and when there is only one piece active like a queen and c7 is hanging, black simply loses game. Now, and if knight f6, you can simply go e4, and you have overwhelming position, and followed by e3. This is good size advantage for white. The one thing that I mentioned that you should know not to get trapped with, if black goes knight f6. Now, if black plays here knight f6, it's very important that you make one and only correct move, which is knight d2. Remember, do not play d5. This is a critical mistake that may cost white a game. It seems like good move. It looks good because we take, and when white takes, we can take here. And after this position, looks like white is much better. And it's true, white is much better, except for one little thing. On the way there, white loses. After e takes f, d takes c, f takes g, and now if white takes on g2, they simply down a pawn for no compensation. And if they take on d7, as we already mentioned, there is a shocking move. Knight takes d7. All of a sudden, black's queen attacking white's bishop, and the game is over. Because taking queen will result to heavy material loss for white. They are down whole rook. And if they don't want to be down rook, then they should be down a piece. Either way, white loses the game. But this is not a problem for white as long as you know about it. So you go knight d2, you are perfectly safe, and you have very good position. Your next move is e3. Knight takes d4, always met with knight takes e4. And white has absolutely great position. So now I want to introduce to you one very interesting system for black. In this position, c4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, g3. This move's been played quite frequently. And just very few days ago, less than a week ago, I saw the game was played between two very strong grandmasters with this system, but it was played, in my opinion, critically wrong by black, and black lost. So, as you know, on g3 there are various different moves. Knight c6, I played this frequently. I also play bishop b4. And move I want to recommend, c6, is not a new move. And it's been played, it's been known for many, many years. The only thing is in a main variation, which is knight f3. This is the main variation, main move for white. We go e4, knight d4, and theoretical move, the main move is d5. And after cd, queen b6. Now, I don't like this variation for black because of the results and the games being played. And the last game, when I saw the game was played just a few days ago, I was surprised. I said, oh, maybe something new. No. Black got bad position and lost. Move I recommend, and I've played throughout the years, I think is a very, very good move. It's a queen b6 move and not d5. Now, main move is knight b3, although once Miguel Najdorf played very interesting move, e3, and claimed that this move totally refutes the idea of queen b6. The idea of move e3, now we go d5, now we support center, and e3 is not such a good placement of a pawn, but his idea was queen c2. And now you can see that black has some problem with natural development. For example, bishop e7 or bishop c5 is losing move because of knight a4, or bishop b4 is not good for black because cd, cd, and knight takes d5. You see the bishop on c8 is hanging. And because of that, black has to make some uncomfortable move, and it was claimed that it's not a good position for black to play. Well, it's not true, because after d5 and queen c2, we go knight d7, and now if black manages to play bishop b4 and castle, they're going to have very good position, because holes on f3 and d3 are very visible. So cd, white has to try to get advantage of the position immediately. cd, knight b5. You see, threatening knight c7 check. We don't want to play king d8. This is ugly looking move. So bishop c5, we develop, we prepare to castle, and if white doesn't have anything after b4, then whole idea for white is not good. Bishop takes d4 simply. Now, if knight takes d4, we castle, and then we go knight e5, and we have serious advantage for black. But on the castling, if knight c7 check, that this is strangely enough, after queen takes c7, black is simply winning, because queen takes c7, bishop takes a1. We have just way too much for a queen. We have rook and 2 knights for a queen. This is big material advantage, not to mention the positional advantage of a lot of weaknesses in white's position. So that takes care of e3 idea. That means white plays knight b3. And now, of course, we don't play d5, because that transposes to the variation that black can get after d5 immediately. But the idea is, with queen b6, knight b3, is to go a5. We are going to play a4. After a5, white has choices. They can go d3, or they can go d4. There is hardly any other choice. Bishop g2 is bad because a4 is a real threat. Well, let's look at them. If d3, then a4, and on knight d2, ed. This is very good position for black. And after ed, a3, then you want to develop, you create significant weaknesses for white on queen side, and or something like b3, you may go bishop c5. And queen e2 check, for example, is clearly not good option, because we simply go king d8, followed by bishop c5. This is not good. So d3 is one option, and d4 is kind of safer option for white, and it's also very safe for black. Black goes a4, knight d2, or immediate c5. That gets us to approximately the same position. c5, we go queen b4, which forces knight d2, and black has absolutely no problem after queen takes d4, knight takes e4. Black has really good position here. King takes d1, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, and d5. White is absolutely forced to take en passant because c5 pawn is hanging, and knight d6 creates pawn on d6 that is half dead. And after c takes d, black has an option of playing bishop f5 and then giving a bishop and taking a pawn. And white has 2 bishops, but black has at least equal position. Or very simple, just go f5 right away and take on d6. Next move, take pawn on d6 with a bishop, and you have at least an equality. Good position. Pawn on a4 is very strong. Rook is going to come from a5 after you take pawn on d6. You have a 100% equal position, at least. So this is not a problem. Now, in this position, if we go queen b6, and after knight b3, a5, and we know what we do on e3, and knight c2 cannot possibly create any problems. We can go bishop c5, and after knight e3, even d5. If this doesn't represent any problems, and on knight b3 we go a5, then I want to know what does white have that black should be afraid of. Nothing. If white has nothing, this is the main variation, main way to play for white, knight f3, e4, and knight d4. On the c6 move, on move 3 for black. This is the main way to play. Now after queen b6, knight b3, and a5, we have great position. And remember, c5 simply loses a pawn because we're going to take on c5, and there is no knight a4 because mate on f2. So d4 or d3 is forced, and after a4, c5, queen b4, we have the position we just looked at. I don't know. I looked at this variation, whole variation, with Ripka. When I invented queen b6 move and I kept playing it, this was like over 20 years ago. Then we didn't have computers. Now, when I checked it with Ripka and with the other engines, and I was very pleased when I saw that they all agreed with me on black having very credible position. So this is something for black to consider. However, there are other options for white. Not knight f3. We just looked only knight f3. And also remember, knight g5 is a meaningless move because we go d5 and knight on g5 stands badly. So here are other options, such as d4 move and bishop g2 move. So in this move, we go d5, c takes d, and c takes d. Now this position, for a while, I thought it was a draw. About 25, 30 years ago, there was queen b3 move that was kind of led to a draw, but what we do here, we simply take with a knight and go rook b8. And it was kind of a draw position. But we don't have to get on the bottom of it because you don't have to memorize this variation. Because on queen b3, there is a better move. Black goes for advantage. And black does have an advantage. And it's knight c6 move. And remember, if white doesn't play queen b3, then after d4, they're going to be much worse. d4 for white here is not good because e takes d, and there is no knight b5 because of queen a5 check. And on queen takes d4, simply knight c6, followed by d4, black has big advantage. So white is practically forced to play queen b3. Then we go knight c6. Now, taking on d5 is also mandatory because white queen b3 was played and d4 is coming. Knight takes d5, knight d4. And this position has been played numerous times with rather depressing results for white. Knight takes f6, g takes f. Black has clear advantage. The reason, queen d1, queen c7, threatening knight c2 check. King f1. Now we go knight c2, rook b1, bishop e6, attacking a2 pawn, b3. Now we go rook c8. Games were played with it, and it was bad results. Bishop b2, bishop a3, bishop c3, knight b4. And now white has an extra pawn. They don't know what they're going to do with the king on f1. Also, black wants to play knight takes a2, attacking c3 bishop. And if white takes, next move is going to be queen c2, attacking all pawns there, or maybe even castling for black and playing rook d8. Position is bad for white. Several games were played, and they had 23% result of scoring for white. There was very bad result. This is not good. So if we came to conclusion that on c6 bishop g2 is not a good move, that only leaves d4 move here. On d4 we simply take queen takes d4. Now that's how there were a number of games played. White won some games, but final word about this variation that white has absolutely no advantage, and the way it should be played: d5, bishop g2, and now not dc. Although dc is also not bad continuation. If queen takes c4, bishop e6, and next move bishop e7. However, they think white is a little better, but we are not going to play d takes c. We're going to go bishop e6, forcing white to take on d5. Now we take back with a pawn, knight f3, knight c6, queen a4, and now not bishop e7, the way they've been playing before, but bishop c5. That gives black very good position. Castling, castling, and I found number of games. Bishop g5 was played everywhere. And now the best move for white is knight e1, to play knight d3 next move. If you go rook d1, I go rook d8. I don't think it makes any difference. And knight e1, so we simply play rook f d8. And after knight d3, we go bishop b6. And knight f4, we go queen e5. Black, for an isolated pawn on d5, black has very active play. And according to Ripka's opinion, and I agree with it 100%. Actually, I had this opinion and I double-checked on Ripka, and I got 100% confirmation that white has no shadow of advantage, and position is at least equal for black. They are very, very active, and you don't even feel the weakness of d5 pawn. So position is equal. So that will complete the second part of c4 e5 English, and I will see there are some interesting possibilities for white and black, and the way English is what you should do. Actually, you're going to do yourself a great favor if you learn this opening, not move by move, but ideas of it. If you remember ideas, every idea that we discussed, you can easily, even if you forgot concrete move, you can easily reconstruct it in your memory. It's very rich opening and very interesting continuation. We will be back with parts 3 and 4 and on. Thank you very much, and I will see you soon.